I'm Wendy from ShinyHappyWorld.com, and today I'm going to teach you how to top stitch, which is also how to edge stitch, because edge stitching is actually just top stitching but really close to the edge of the fabric. I'm going to show you 3 different top stitching or edge stitching techniques. The first thing I want to show you is the foot that I use on my machine. This is the standard presser foot that I use for all my sewing. And a really nice feature about it when you're top stitching, or especially when you're edge stitching, is that it's clear in the middle. Some machines come with a solid metal foot, but they have an option to buy one with a clear foot, and that is a really nice thing to invest in. It won't cost very much, but it's really nice to be able to see right up close to the stitching line. So that's the first thing I wanted to show you. Now I'm going to show you the first top stitching technique. This is some double fold bias tape, and when you stitch that down, since the stitching is on the top of your fabric, it's technically top stitching. I'm doing this in red thread so you'll be able to see it. Now, since my machine has that clear presser foot, I'm going to be able to see really clearly just how close I am to the edge of the bias tape. Now I want to show you a trick. If you don't have that feature of just needle down, you can set your needle into the fabric, right the depth that you want it to be, and then get a piece of masking tape and set your guideline here. Sometimes that's easy to follow because where it ends up isn't going to be on one of the standard lines that's marked on your throat plate, and this will be an easy way for you to follow that spacing, because one of the things that's really important about top stitching is that you get it very even, because it is going to be visible. I'm going to go ahead and pull this one out and show it to you. If you're off, or if your line is tending to waver, it's really going to be noticeable. So do what you can. Either invest in one of the clear plastic feet or put a separate marking down with some masking tape so you have an easy guideline. That's one type of top stitching. Now I'm going to show you another type. This is what is most commonly done on sportswear or casual clothing. And this is what is most commonly referred to as straight up top stitching. Oh, I should, before I put this in here, I pressed the seam allowance toward the polka dotted fabric. Usually when you're doing this in a pattern, it's going to tell you press it toward the bodice or press it toward the back or something like that. It'll give you some direction on which direction to press that seam allowance, and then the top stitching is going to hold it in place so it can't shift around. So what I'm going to do is top stitch right along the edge. Now the other thing about top stitching is that very often it's done a 1/4 inch from the seam. So I've got my seam here and I'm running it for my machine. A 1/4 inch is from the stitch line is right at the edge of the presser foot. So that's going to leave some stitching visible. Pull that out. Visible on the top of the fabric, and it's going to hold that seam allowance flat so it doesn't tend to shift around as the fabric gets washed and worn, since it's not going to be ironed usually. And then the last thing I want to show you is what's more commonly referred to as edge stitching, but you'll also see it called top stitching in a lot of places. This is 2 pieces of fabric sewn together and then pressed with the seam allowance on the inside. And we've actually done this. I just didn't think to give you a video about it first. This is what we've done on the dinner napkins and on the easiest finish on the receiving blankets. This is another one where it's helpful to have that clear presser foot, because you want to get very close to the edge of your fabric. And this one is particularly useful to use that little masking tape technique. But because there's nothing else over here, you don't want to put tape right over the feed dogs. See, those are your bumpy feed dogs. You want to put it just in front of them. And that'll work just fine as a guide. You're not going to gum up your feed dogs with the adhesive on the back of the tape. But if you can't see where the edge of that fabric is, this will help you guide that right where you want it. Edge stitching is usually done in a matching thread color, where top stitching is often done in a contrasting color, but I did it contrasting here so you could see it. But again, you can see how important it is to have that be a nice straight line, because it is going to be really visible. So that's it. That's how you top stitch. Remember, top stitching is any kind of stitching that is visible on the top side of the fabric, and edge stitching is just top stitching that's very, very close to the edge of the fabric. I'm Wendy from ShinyHappyWorld.com. I'll see you next time.